Welcome and thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of the Jane Irrigation Training Series. I'm Richard Restuccia, Vice President of Water Management Solutions. And today we are going to be talking about 10 things you should ask before you buy some ag technology products, specifically irrigation products. But one thing I think about this subject is that as I thought about it, researched a little bit and talked to Cory and Jeff about what they were going to present, I started to think we're using the example of ag irrigation, but really these apply to almost any technology products you buy. And I'll tell you, I've been doing some searching for a washer and dryer, and I was shocked to find out I can use Bluetooth and wirelessly connect my phone and start my dryer now. I mean, I haven't made the purchase yet, but that's something that's possible. This technology is really expanding quickly, and you really have to stay on top of it. So helping us stay on top of it today is going to be Cory Broad and Jeff Tuel. Now, Cory, as you know, is a certified crop advisor. He's a certified irrigation designer. He was the agriculturist of the year in Madera County a couple of years ago. He does a great job on these trainings. More importantly, he does an excellent job with all his customers. Cory really cares about the customers. He cares about what he's doing. And he's really good about giving solid advice to growers out there in the field. So Cory, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for the kind words and introduction, Richard. I'm happy to be here. And this is a topic and kind of discussion that I think is very pertinent given the amount of ag tech out there and also some of the challenges in agriculture, not just in California, but in the United States.
Yeah, that's great, Cory. Thanks. And then we also have Jeff Tuel. He's the Executive Vice President of Jane Irrigation Holdings. And Jeff is our thought leader on our ag technology products. Jeff has been involved in technology for more than 20 years and has really grabbed a hold of this vision of what agriculture can be. He's done a great job leading that at Jane. And we're really fortunate to have him on today because he is a wealth of knowledge in this area. He's a wealth of knowledge in a lot of areas too, but especially these ag tech, and he's going to help us. So Jeff, welcome also to you.
Thanks, Richard. It's always great to be here. This is the first joint webinar I've done with Cory, so I'm excited about that. Cory and I really enjoy working, with him. He and I get involved in some pretty in-depth and sometimes pretty challenging issues that some of our growers are facing out there. And he's just a great resource. And so I'm just happy to be on with you guys today.
Yeah. We've got a wealth of knowledge here. So thanks to both of you. Now, one of the things I was thinking about is, I start to hear about some of these technology horror stories. And I think, is this something that's getting blown out of proportion? Is the stories I'm hearing about irrigation, is it solid irrigation or other technologies experiencing challenges too? What's happening here? And I'll start with you, Cory. Do the consumers really need to be aware?
They do, and I think that's again kind of where the pertinence of the discussion comes from today. I think you talked about this potential purchase you're looking at. You can make all of these reviews. You can see a lot of information. They're independent kind of third parties, Consumer Reports, Better Business Bureau. There's all these options that you have as a consumer to go and look and probably get a really objective review on something pretty quickly. And in our industry, it's very hard to find that. And, that's, again, kind of what we're going to go through today is what can you ask to empower yourself and try and get that report made? Because unfortunately, there's not a lot of them just out there for you to access.
Yeah, good points. And Jeff, what do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. I think I was thinking as Cory was responding, and I have a lot of grower friends, and they would probably all say they learn about ag technology and a lot of things through the school of hard knocks, unfortunately. And so, as we'll talk more about today, there's just, there's a lot of questions that should be asked and frankly need to be answered. I think we can all do a better job, and growers can do a better job of holding us and their vendors, more accountable, and that'll help ensure that that they're getting the solutions that they're paying for and investing in the long term. So I'm excited about today.
Yeah, so I love one thing you said there, Jeff, and I really do believe this, that the onus of, the responsibility of getting the right product for you does fall to you as the consumer, right?
Right.
You have
Right.
to go out and do your homework. You do have to research. You have people that are trusted advisors, and of course you're going to reach to them, but you have the responsibility too. And that's why I like that you guys are going to talk about 10 things you should be asking. That way I can really know as a consumer that I'm getting the right technology, the right product for what I need. And it's not that I'm so worried that I'm going to have a blow up or a failure or something really going to go bad. I just want to be sure I'm spending my money and getting the most for it. So that's what I'm excited about here. So anyway, well, Cory, I think we're going to start with you today, right?
Yes, sir. We'll take it away. And so the foundation for the discussion today, this is actually the third part of a three-part series for the Irrigation Consumer Bill of Rights, which was developed by Cal Poly, the Irrigation Training and Research Center. And so we have two previous webinars that discuss more about just general irrigation systems and those purchases. But they've worked up a document. It's actually the longest document of the three that's titled Soil and Plant Moisture Monitoring Systems. So to freshen it up, make it also a little bit more tangible and easier, we kind of took the 10 most important points that we felt were applicable for growers and potential consumers out, and that's what we're going to go through. But I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the ITRC for spending the time and the effort to put all of this together. It's available on the website, as you can see down below. The document is worth reading in its entirety. And again, we appreciate them in helping us as manufacturers add value to the industry and empowering consumers to ask the right questions.
Yeah, thanks, Cory, for pointing that out about the Irrigation Research Training Center. They do a great job over there. And I do want to remind everybody, I have both the Q&A and the chat open this afternoon. So if you've got some questions for Cory, Jeff, or myself, be sure to put them in there. And at the appropriate time, I'll pass them on. Thank you.
Perfect. And so kind of looking at AgTech as an overview, I think we know that AgTech's changing rapidly, and the number of farms that are using AgTech and a number of capacities is also increasing. And many are familiar with these drivers of adoption, but you have increased labor cost, you have a decreased labor pool and availability, maybe even unreliable at times. You have increased input costs, and then stricter regulations. We're not unfamiliar with that in California. And then I think there's also a number of growers and operations that are looking for a competitive advantage. And it may not be today, but it's 5-year or 10-year roadmap where they need to get data and they need to get actions that they can start implementing now to measure those practices going forward. And so we have all these really great reasons to adopt technology. Why are we having the discussion today then to say, hey, what should you watch out for? And I think, this is really a generalization of what we're going to get into, but is the technology usable, and does it do or achieve what you need it to do? Is the provider sound and reliable, and will that technology become obsolete? And not just obsolete in the sense of it doesn't work anymore or is not supported, but is there eventually a better resolution or better data that you could have invested in, and technology that'll be more relevant, I would say, longer. So that's kind of the way that I approach that. But jumping into our topic at hand, starting with number 1, and I like this, at the beginning of the document, they say, before purchasing any equipment, have you had your system distribution uniformity checked of your irrigation system? And underperforming irrigation systems not going to allow that full utility of what you're investing or purchasing in, because your system is not performing up to standards. So no matter what you're measuring, you're kind of getting bad data in a way. And at Jane, our first recommendation is, like with our water management service, is that you have a system uniformity check done. We actually provide that for our customers. And the reality is if your field or system is scoring too low, we would prefer that you would invest that money into the system to make sure that it's up to par so that you can maximize that value of the investment. And, you know, the best way I can break it down is, you know, Teslas are very popular. It's kind of one of the most technological cars on the road today. It's very efficient. If I gave you a Tesla, Richard, would you want to drive it with the parking brake on? I don't think that would bode well, even though it has all this technology and all this great stuff. I think, you know, you're missing a big opportunity for utilization of that investment.
Yeah, so Cory, I just want to interrupt a second, and because how big of a roadblock is this? How long does a DU test take, right? And I think this is distribution uniformity, right? And is it expensive? And is this the first roadblock in me getting technology? And I just say, hey, man, this is already sounding too complicated.
No, I think that's a fair question. The amount of time that it takes in the grand scheme of things is really nothing. There's a lot of providers out there that can do this for you. There's also training available so you can do it yourself with your field staff and understand your system a little bit better. And the reality is there's a lot of simple steps that can be taken in order to improve irrigation efficiency on the farm. And I mean, that could be maybe another webinar we do one day, which is, hey, here are the 10 simple steps to quote, get your car running better. And I think that there's a ton of opportunity. It really is not that much of a barrier to entry. If getting a physical was a barrier to getting surgery, we would do a lot less surgeries in this country. So physicals are you know, pretty straightforward, pretty common. It's no different than that.
I think that's a really good point, Cory. And we often find that there is no shortcut to excellence, right?
100%.
We want to be the best grower we can be, then these are some steps we need to take there. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So kind of looking at the next set of slides, I was going to pass it over to Jeff and give him the opportunity to expand on some of these points.
Sounds good. I think you gave me all the hard ones. So you certainly gave me a few of the more politically charged up ones, but I'm up for it. I'm excited about it. You know, here in this particular instance on question 2, there's two very important and often misunderstood questions. How many sensors will be used per field? And you've heard all kinds of rules of thumb on that. And then at what depths, you know, will the sensors be placed at a single location? So originally I thought about answering this in general for just sensors in general, but the depth question really, I think IRTC was aiming this towards soil moisture sensors. So, you know, I'll talk generally, but that was the intent, was looking at soil moisture. For me, to answer these questions, we really need to answer some clarifying questions. So I'm going to encourage the growers out in our audience to listen to these clarifying questions, because this is what every vendor should be talking with you about. They should be asking these clarifying questions. And if they're not, then I mean, frankly, you should probably go on to the next vendor. So the first thing I would ask is, what is the crop? And the main reason for this question is determine really the targeted rooting depth, which in turn answers the second question of at what depth will the sensors be placed. So row crops typically have shallower rooting depths. So commonly we're looking at soil moisture between, say, 4 and 24 inches max. So if someone's trying to sell you a 48-inch or a 60-inch soil moisture probe for your tomatoes or your onions or cotton corn, you know, melon crop, something like that, it would be a total waste of money. Not to mention, you know, much harder to remove before harvest, because we all know on the row crops, you're going to pull the soil moisture probes out before you harvest. When you're looking at permanent crops such as almonds, pistachios, vineyards, citrus, etc., walnuts, the rooting depth is much deeper. And this is where you should get a recommendation for, I would say, at least a 36-inch probe. And in most cases, 48-inch would be more appropriate. That's probably what we would recommend. But we also have a lot of our permanent crop growers that have salt issues. And so they'll ask for a 60-inch probe because they really want to see the water movement down past the root zone when they're trying to flush the salts down. So you want to be able to see that movement. If you get the right kind of probe, you know, you'll be able to see EC. So you'll be able to see the salts and see the movement of the salts, which can also be important. But the key here to choosing depth is knowing the soil profile that you're farming to. And that will really ensure that you're keeping your irrigation water and the nutrients in that soil zone. So that's really what you're after. Now, to answer how many sensors, the most important clarifying question here is how much variation is there in the field in terms of soil? And I'm even going to say elevation. Soil variation is pretty obvious. We all talk about that, but a lot of vendors do not consider elevation change, which can affect the flow of water, pooling, drain down, of the irrigation system, et cetera. But you should always consider placing sensors in areas of the field where you have significant soil variation. And really to cover any significant differences in soil holding capacity and infiltration rates. We really don't have time. We've done some other webinars on this to go into the details on this, but just suffice it to say that lighter, sandier soils take water much differently than heavier, tighter soils do. And you should always consider that when deciding on the number of sensors and placement. And then lastly, I would say the vendor should be asking, how many irrigation sets do you run for the field? So my rule of thumb, and this is not, one size fits all, every situation is a little different, is that if the soil is reasonably consistent across the field, then you can get away with one sensor on 100 acres or less. Now, that may sound like a lot of acres, but if you have a fairly uniform field, and you have a good DU, you're not going to see huge variations in the soil, the holding capacity and infiltration. It's rare, to be honest, to get that kind of field. If it's a larger field or has soil variation and multiple irrigation sets, then you should really consider putting sensors in each set and or soil type. And I would say the ideal setup would be to have one sensor for each set so you can monitor the applied water and what it's doing for each irrigation set. And to wrap up on this slide, in my mind, the big takeaway here is to make sure your vendor is asking these clarifying questions and you are getting recommendations that would be consistent with your field, your crop, and your farming practices.
Jeff, those are great points. And every once in a while, I hear somebody say, well, we can do this without using sensors at all. Is that a red flag, or can people do it without sensors too?
I mean, yeah, it would be a red flag for me. I mean, I think they're talking about some satellite technology out there, that can do some water balance calculations and things like that. I mean, frankly, we haven't seen that as, one, the satellite is not there when you're applying the water. You don't see infiltration rates. And, I think getting a moisture unit, looking at MUs and the changes that are occurring dynamically as you irrigate are super critical, and making sure that water and the nutrients are staying in the root zone. So that would be a little bit of a red flag if that was the only approach they were recommending.
Yeah, so really, if you could do satellite imaging and sensors, that's probably the best way to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great. Yeah. So I appreciate that question that came in while we were presenting.
There we go. So I think I have this one as well. This question, it should seem pretty straightforward. Cellular network is involved. We're talking about reliable service and just cellular in general. We all have cell phones. Unfortunately, a lot of vendors can be misleading in their answers in this. So again, I'll go through kind of what you should be thinking about, the questions you should be asking here. Communications between the devices and up to the cloud are really critical as far as having reliable communications. And if you don't have reliable communications, you're going to have missed data. You're going to miss irrigations if you're using automation. And that can be one of the most frustrating elements in any AgTech solution that you might choose. So, I mean, generally speaking, most cellular-based telemetry devices today, they are reliable with two caveats. Who is the provider, meaning AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, et cetera. And then if the vendor's device is limited to one carrier, make sure there is acceptable service for that carrier in your field. And there's really, only a couple ways to test that, and that's to have something with that service out in the field. The second caveat is related to unreliable reception, and that could be caused by the type of cellular antenna used. So we see this quite often. You should ask, is the cellular antenna internal or external to the device? If it's internal, ask the question, simple question, can an external antenna be added for more reliable service? Sometimes in poor reception areas, the cellular modem antenna has to be elevated to get reliable service. So if the vendor's device will not support it, your service will simply be sporadic or non-existent. And I would say, and this isn't necessarily to poke at any specific vendors out there, but we run into it. We hear these stories all the time. Be careful when you're quoted a standard antenna, or you don't ask the questions. And then when the installation occurs, the installer tells you, hey, I need to put a high gain antenna in and put it on a 30-foot tower, and that's going to be another $600 or another $1,000. And maybe you made the decision to go with that vendor because they were cheaper. And now all of a sudden, you've got to upgrade 3 or 4 sites right out of the gate with an extra, $500,000-$600,000 per site in order to get reliable communication. On the radio side of things, most radios are 900 megahertz. Most all suppliers, vendors are using 900 megahertz. And I would say the biggest thing there is just be cautious on how far they say the radio will reliably communicate. It's probably the number one, what I'll call spec stretch in our industry. When someone tells you their radio will communicate 5 or even maybe 3 miles 5, 4, 3 miles, make sure you read the fine print, because that typically will say when it's on top of a hill with direct line of sight down to the radios below. And, it's just with FCC wattage limitations, radios are simply not reliable beyond a mile or two. And that can even be cut in half down to a half mile or less in heavy tree canopy, unless you can elevate the antenna to achieve line of sight. So some people might have said line of sight a few times. They might be, wondering what the heck I'm talking about. It's super simple. It's just a direct line between 2 points without any obstructions, between them. So you can think hills, trees, buildings, any of those kinds of things will obstruct line of sight. And 900 megahertz is pretty good as far as transmission goes, but it's still, limited to that line of sight. Typically it's about 1,500 feet if you have a lot of canopy and or buildings that might be in the way of it. So just be careful of that. You can use directional antennas and repeaters to get greater distances. Again, ask that question. Just make sure the vendor's equipment supports it and that the costs are included in your quote if needed. And I think, let's see, we've got one other here, on the redundancy side, that question, daisy chain. Daisy chain simply means that multiple telemetry devices communicate through one another, back and forth to a gateway or to a central communication device. And typically that would be called a mesh network. The redundancy comes in when the system can communicate via alternative paths. If one path is not working, and any system you purchase should do that automatically. It's also, on the redundancy side, it's also important to know if the field devices store data for a reasonable amount of time, if the communications were to go down, and then transmit all of that data once communications are restored. And this is really critical if the device is being used for control, say to start a pump or operate a valve or something like that. In other words, if I have an irrigation schedule set to run and I lose communications, will the schedule still run And you should definitely make sure any system you're considering will do this. And unfortunately, not all do. And then I guess I would say, lastly, I would have to fire myself if I didn't take this opportunity to say that Jane Logic RC3 telemetry device has both cellular and 900 megahertz capability built in. And it's got enough storage to house about 10 days worth of data if communications are lost. And if you were running an irrigation schedule and communications suddenly went out during the irrigation schedule, it would complete that irrigation schedule without interruption. So we've tried to think of those things and build those things in.
Gosh, talk about peace of mind, what you just said, right? That just gives the grower peace of mind and might be something most people don't think about until they have the problem.
Right.
So I'm really glad you brought that up. And then the communication side of it, I've seen so many projects or enough projects derailed because of communication. I know that one of the first things I like people speccing projects to ask is, how's the cell coverage? Let's find this out right away. Let's figure out what, and that way we don't get down the road and have a problem. So yeah, I think this is a great one.
It's a tricky one for sure.
Yeah.
So I think I have this one as well. We'll talk a little bit about annual costs. And, this, when I got to thinking about answering this question, it's a little bit of tricky one, because all of the vendors in ag tech, we all charge a little differently. And so the best advice I can give up front is to make sure you ask for all life cycle costs associated with the equipment, and then any associated services. Ask those questions. For a standard system purchase at Jane, we give a price for the hardware, the installation cost, and the annual subscription as 3 separate amounts. So you know exactly what you're paying for each one. And the only exception to that is, as Cory mentioned, our new water management services, where we give a single dollar per acre per year price. And that's all in. That includes the hardware, the installation, the maintenance, the DU test Cory talked about, and then probably most importantly, the weekly scheduling reports. We really don't do any a la carte pricing unless there's something specialized that the grower needs. And I would say, when you're talking about the annual cost with the vendor, it's also a good time to ask them about warranties. Ours is we have a 3-year warranty, which I think is industry leading on our C3 telemetry device. And then on any of the other devices that we connect from third parties, such as soil moisture probes or flow meters, weather stations, et cetera, we pass along that warranty to you, but we handle everything for you. And some vendors take a more a la carte approach, and you can pick the various features and services that you want and then add up the total. There's really nothing wrong with that. Some will provide general maintenance as part of their annual service or subscription fees. You just need to make sure to ask. And I'm not aware, the one on the bottom here, the tractor blight and the wear and tear, I'm not aware of any that include Jane, including Jane, that cover tractor blight, animal damage, or wear and tear. And I think I might have skipped over, installation costs. I'll be quick on this one. So, the question of, can you do it yourself? Most telemetry equipment, wiring, control wiring, soil moisture probes, et cetera, they require professional installation. In my opinion, the costs are minimal, and frankly, you want the vendor to do it. A few companies some years ago tried self-installations, and the growers ended up paying more and being frustrated when the company had to send technicians out there to fix installation problems. So if the vendor installs it, then they're responsible for the system working properly and any of the workmanship issues that might arise. And one thing I do want to say is, not all installations are equal. It's really important. So I would encourage you to inspect actual sites for any vendor that you're considering. And I have seen everything from duct tape to wire ties holding devices, antennas on poles. I mean, it's terrible. Wires laying loosely on the ground or strung across the filter station pad. And in my opinion, how the installation looks is the level of professionalism you can expect from the vendor. So even if you can't make it out to sites for that supplier you're thinking about, have them give you pictures of installation, of recent installations, and then hold them accountable to that same level of install on your system. And I can definitely proudly say I feel, Jane is unmatched in the area of installation. Our guys are just so clean and so tidy, using conduit. Everything's bolted down. It's just really clean, and we get compliments on that part all the time.
Yeah, two things, Jeff, I want to mention is one, so true about the installations. When you think about the amount of money that is in that field behind you in your screen share right now,
Right.
this is a few $100s for a professional installation where it's set up correctly and done right is nothing.
Right.
And then the other thing I really appreciate about what you guys do is your transparency in the pricing. And oftentimes I've run into people who might say, well, such and such product is less. And then we drill down and we find out, well, that's one subscription, one person using it on one device.
Right.
And it's intentionally done to really get you to that product on a product comparison, one-to-one, which is what mostly people do. So I love that you guys are so transparent with your pricing, and I would feel really comfortable if I was a grower knowing that I was knowing what I was paying for and what I was getting.
No, and I appreciate that. It's something on the subscription side. We have a one price. I mean, we'll have a different price if you, depending on volume or certain elements within the field, but that one price is the price. We don't have like a super duper software subscription that you pay extra for. And if you want the price I quoted, that's the basic software. It's you can look at things, but you can't really do anything. I mean, there's just none of that. It's one price. You get access to the entire software, and that's I think the best way to go.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I appreciate about Jane Unity as well is sometimes a business model for a new company is we're going to attract a bunch of subscribers. We're going to build our subscriber base. We're not going to charge them much to get on, and then we're going to show some investment group, some venture capital group, how many subscribers we have, and we're going to get bought because of our subscribers.
Right.
It's a gamble, one, that they'll get the subscribers if people won't see through that. And two, it's not a really long-term sustainable business plan for the subscribers.
Right.
Whoever buys that company is going to face some hurdles and challenges. So
Absolutely.
I love that that's not an issue for Jane Logic either.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think this is where I jump back in again, and kind of taking the words right out of my mouth, Richard, as far as it's just transparency. If you took those few slides that Jeff did together, it doesn't matter whether it was the price or physically the service being provided. It all comes down to transparency. The vendor supplier needs to be transparent with the customer on what are you getting, how well will it work, and how much does it cost me. And I think if you get that for most people, in most purchases, you're probably going to have a happy customer and a successful relationship. So Jeff kind of touched on, who'd be responsible for breakdowns and things like that. But, just looking at durability in agriculture, we understand that ag is tough. These things are out in the environment, in the elements, and they're kind of getting exposed to a number of different things. We do see tractor blight every once in a while, unfortunately, on a number of things in the field. But your durability is going to be important. And Jeff touched on it. Understand the life cycle of that equipment. I think we have a pretty good understanding of our tractors, our sprayers, our harvesters. What's the life cycle of that piece of equipment? What things need to be maintained more often? So on and so forth. With this new investment, something you've maybe never handled before, understanding that from your supplier, I think, is really important. It's going to influence the cost of that system over time. I think we're really proud to always kind of discuss, hey, this is our total cost of ownership based on kind of what you're looking at purchasing. And obviously it varies on, your scale and what you're getting, but having the lowest total cost of ownership. You see a lot of automotive makers trying to market that as well, because it's not about the price of it today. It's about, this is a 10-year investment, a 20-year investment. What is the cost of that? And I think that's really a fair question to ask and understand. Another way that durability plays in, and I put the second part of this question in here, is how accurate is the sensor? And that's important because if you have a product that isn't very durable, it depends on the type of product. Is it a fail product or is it a wear product? A wear product would be generally something like your car tires, where there's a broad range of values, before it blows out, hopefully. So how that tire performs on mile 1 versus mile 50,000, and then you didn't get them replaced and now it's 100,000, and then you're surprised when it blows out. But what's the effectiveness of that product at those times? And so you can end up with data that's either missing if it's a product that just fails, or you can end up with corrupted data because maybe it wears out over time. And so understanding that's important. And then on the actual physical accuracy of the product, you need to understand how important accuracy is to your task. And I say that in the sense that, can a sensor be 5% off plus or minus and still add value? I think in certain instances, it can. In other instances, it certainly can't. And so what you have to understand is, how accurate is it? But also, what does it cost you to get that next level of resolution? Because maybe there is another product out there that provides it, but wow, that's 3x, 5x, 10x what I would be spending. Could I live without that? And so just understanding those nuances, I think, is really key to picking the right sensor.
Yeah, so true, Cory. And, I'm holding up my phone right now. I don't think you can see it though, but I always think about, if I strap this to a pole and put it in a pistachio field for a year, is it going to work a year later? And my guess is probably not. And when I see the low percentage of returns or issues with the Jane equipment in the field, I'm just blown away by how bulletproof it is.
100%. And as somebody who manages water for customers and really depends on it just as much, maybe sometimes more than they do, because I'm the one who's looking at it, I've been super impressed over the years, and really have no issue recommending this to any of my customers that are currently, utilizing some technology, or people who are jumping into it, because I know it's going to be there, because it's there for me. I've essentially taken the grower's role in certain instances, and I rely on it a lot. So I'm very proud of that. But on the topic there, I kind of talked about missing and corrupted data. Jeff touched on this a little bit earlier as well. Looking at how often that data is transferred from the field to a base station, or particularly the cloud in certain instances, and the interval in which the data is collected. I think it's important because, as Jeff said, if there's a temporary outage, can that system hold data or a command if it's in the middle of an automation cycle? Understanding that's really important. And then the data resolution, as far as how often it's being pulled. So if you have a soil moisture probe in the ground, do you want data intervals that are every day, where it's just taking one snapshot at one time, or do you want something that's maybe every 15 minutes? It really depends on your scenario, but I'll say this: when it comes to irrigation events, having data resolution more frequently than daily is super important, because you can see how water is moving through the profile better. You can look at evaporation, you can look at weather influences, runoff. It just gives you that tighter resolution that I think you deserve as a consumer. And then if the information is current, and I use that in quotations there, and not maybe every day, but every 15 minutes, or maybe even tighter intervals, can it provide an alert for you? Because I think that's a huge value added. We're measuring all of this data. What if I can tell you, hey, Richard, just like your washing machine would, hey, it's time to switch the laundry, like you said earlier with the Bluetooth. Why can't my irrigation system say, I just performed your irrigation event, or your irrigation system's on, or, hey, you have a really high flow situation, maybe something broke, so on and so forth. So having that alerting function, I think, takes that data and moves it in towards that manageable action, which I'll touch on here in a little bit.
Cory, I just want to share a quick story. We had a customer, this gentleman's a good customer, good friend of mine, one of our WMS customers, and the cell service in his area went down a couple weeks ago. And so the devices stopped reporting, and we were upset about that. We went out, checked, made sure everything was okay. Everything was okay. Cell tower was down. And so we thought, okay, it'll probably come back up pretty quick. It didn't. So one of our guys, David Lindsay, took the C3, put it in his truck, drove several miles till he got to a cell tower that had service. The C3 connected, it downloaded the data. He drove it back out, put it back into the field, kept collecting data. And then when communication restored, so Richard, in your phone conversation, I was just thinking it'd be like you starting a conversation, losing connection, not knowing you lost it, keep talking. And then the person on the other end is talking too, and you don't know it. And then when you get more cell service, the whole conversation was kept for you. And so I don't know, it's just a cool story of, I think, how technology should work.
Yeah, I'm going to guess too, and this is another reason why I think it's a really cool story. I know David Lindsay's commitment to customers,
Right.
and how rabid he is about that. And
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that, I think a lot of listeners out there are probably thinking, gee, how much did that cost? Now, if this is a water management service customer, what did this cost them, Jeff?
Nothing. As you're talking about for David, and I watched it, somebody just opened my door. So
Yeah.
I had to wait for just a second.
Yeah, I meant just for the service call of David Lindsay. I
Oh.
think that was thrown in. That was included.
It was, yeah, as I said, nothing. Didn't cost the customer anything. And that's part of the partnership, that we have there as part of our water management services.
So no, I think that's a great story, Jeff, and really shows the commitment of what we're doing and what we're willing to do for customers. And again, it plays right back into the total cost of ownership. Maybe other people would have said, hey, it's not my fault that Verizon's down. I can't control it, or whoever the provider may have been. And yet, we can find a way to make that work. So as somebody who is in the field a lot and doing water management for customers and working on irrigation systems, this slide is really pertinent to me. So how will that information be displayed? So we talked about getting all that data out of the field, but now how is it coming to you as the end user? And with that, are there downloadable files with values? So personally, I believe that data should be able to be accessed offline once it's out of the field, and then could be downloaded onto a laptop or some type of hard drive in Excel or another program. And basically making that data more tangible helps you increase the value of that data. There's a number of different layers that you could put that on within your own organization. But I think that's a really fair question to ask, and probably something you should look for. From the information display, the software should be easy to use, no matter what device you're using it on. So as somebody who's in the field a lot, I'm using it on my iPhone. If you see the pictures on the left-hand side, that's actually a screenshot off of my iPhone 12 that I took. It's for one of my water management customers. And I kind of customized my view. These are the 3 things that come up when I open up the app. And these are the 3 things that are most important to me. It can be customized for each person. But again, it's easy to use. It's very good resolution for a cell phone, and should be a requirement for the grower, because if I had to use my laptop every time, it would be significantly less valuable for me because I may not have it with me all the time. And then talking about some of that easeability, look for graphs and charts as options and not just the traditional graph. So you can see there's one line graph at the top there, but that's not a traditional soil moisture chart that a lot of people provide, where it's each sensor individually over a certain time frame. I actually customize this into a management zone. And so I'm looking at data that's taking it from an area and then providing that to me. So it's very personalized, and I know exactly what it means, and it's easy for me to consume. In other instances, we have our infiltration chart that we developed, which is essentially just those graphs inverted that's showing water moving down through the soil profile. So by just clicking on the icon, you can look at it and you can say, wow, my last irrigation event, I got water down to 36 inches. Hey, my goal is to get a little bit deeper. All right, well, I ran 12 hours. Maybe I need to run 16. And so very quickly you can see that and get that information. I think that's where a bunch of value is added.
That's amazing. You can just see that on your phone that easily.
All right, I think I'm up, and again, you gave me the controversial questions. This is really, it's a hot and serious topic in our industry, and unfortunately, there have been a lot of AgTech companies that have had to shut their doors. And most people think these situations are limited to small startups, but look at what happened with Rainbird and Climate Minder. That's a big deal. When companies big or small shut down or pull out, it's hard on the growers that supported them. And that makes it harder on companies like Jane that are committed to the long term. There's not a more difficult, I can say this from experience, there's not a more difficult sale than a scorned grower that's invested good money into ag technology to only be left, hanging in the wind with equipment that's basically worthless. It's like the old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And we can't blame growers. However, as we said, at the very beginning of this, I do believe growers can and should do a better job of vetting the company that they're thinking of doing business with. They should look at how long they've been in business. And by this, I mean commercially viable, not when they started tinkering with the idea in a basement or in a barn or something like that. Ask who backs them financially, who their owners are. Do they have enough cash flow to sustain the business in the long term? Because that's what you're in it for. As a grower, you're in it for the long term. If they're owned by private equity, what's the exit strategy? And I have nothing against private equity. I've run 2 companies owned by private equity firms, and they really do a great job of helping companies grow by infusing cash. But rest assured, they're in it for one thing, and that's a return on investment. And they will sell it, or they will try to get other investors to invest within a 3 to 7 year window, depending on their strategy with that particular investment. And the key for growers is to understand the risks and to gather enough factual data to make a sound investment. Now, Jane has been in the agricultural business since 1963, which was the year I was born. So I don't want to bring that up, but it's the truth. And they have been investing in growing their ag business in the U.S. since 1985. And they've made 3 significant acquisitions in ag tech over the last 6 years. So, on top of those investments, we've continued to invest more than $1 million per year in innovating and improving the robustness of our software and hardware platforms. Things like data transmission and processing speeds, information security, uptime, reliability. We have long-term growers. Richard alluded to this a little bit. We have long-term growers that are now upgrading their sites that have been operating in their fields for more than 13 years. And that's significant. I mean, that's significant. And, if I seem passionate about this topic, it's because I am. I have talked with too many growers that have been left with inoperable and abandoned equipment, or speak about the hyped up sales pitch they bought into only to be left with little or no support. These facts, they're facts. These facts have set our industry back in terms of technology adoption. It's made growers skeptical, and who can blame them? I'll get off my soapbox, but I truly encourage any growers considering investing in ag tech to do the same due diligence on the company you're about to partner with, just like you would if you were buying new ground or making a financial investment or taking on a partner in your business. And then the last bullet on here goes, it kind of goes without saying, you should definitely know before you ever sign any purchase agreement or contract, whether you're going to own the equipment or lease or rent it. There should absolutely be no surprises, and don't be shy about asking these questions.
Yeah, I love those questions, Jeff. Thank
Yeah,
you.
You're welcome. So this is a much more a fun slide here. So nothing controversial. it's a great area to explore with the vendor. How expandable is the system? No grower ever comes out of the gate and buys everything they need to cover their farming, their entire farming operations with ag technologies. Most often, and for some of the reasons that I just talked about on the former slide, growers start slowly. They start with a field or maybe a couple of fields. And it could be they're just, wanting to test the technology, they just want to get in, or they've been burned. Even within fields, they may only want to start with just soil moisture monitoring and perhaps a weather station. So sometimes it's even trimmed down further. So the key advice, I would give on this is to ask the vendor to give you a design as if you're going to cover the entire ranch. Ask specifically about what additional hardware is necessary to expand. So questions like, what if I added pressure monitoring or flow monitoring? What if I want to add pump control and valve control? How about monitoring my reservoir level or chemical tank level? Think about what's important to your farming operation and then ask how they would incorporate it. In my opinion, the best systems are flexible and the best companies can offer a one-stop shop to meet your needs. So a dedicated or single function device, it will limit your options and it will force you to either have to add a lot more devices at higher costs or to go to another vendor to get what you need. And this kind of brings up another subject that I think is important for you to ask. And we hear growers all the time say how tired they are of having to deal with 2, 3, 4 different vendors to get the technology they need. There are a number of vendors that partner with a lot of other companies because, frankly, they can't provide what you need themselves. I hear stories all the time of the finger pointing that goes on when something doesn't work, and the grower ends up trying to chase down which so-called partner's equipment is causing the problem. They're literally getting bounced back and forth. One saying our system's working fine, it's their API or it's their hardware that's causing the problem. I just want to say, be cautious if someone tells you they work with everyone. Sounds good. We all heard it, right? It sounds good. It looks good on marketing materials, but it can be quite a pain. I won't finish the pain where it's a pain to work through these problem resolutions, in the field. So make sure you understand who will be responsible for resolving issues. And Jane has a one partner perspective, and that grower, the partner is the grower. That's who our partner is. And we are a true one-stop shop. And if it's attached to one of our devices, or you can see it in our Jane Logic software, then we supplied it, we installed it, and you will only ever have to deal with one company. And, frankly, we've gotten some criticism from some of our competitors for not opening up our system to connect with everyone. And with the breadth of our offering and our commitment to the grower as our partner, we simply do not feel the need to, and we will never get into the finger pointing game. And that's just not who we are as a company.
Hey, Jeff, I really love this question. How expandable is the system? Because really a good manager should be thinking, where am I going to be 5 years, 10 years down the road? Will this fit my need? Because I'm not doing it twice.
Right.
And I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it right the first time.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I think those are good points. And so we've talked about getting all of this data. We've talked about all this equipment. Your irrigation system's running great now. Really, the thing that I'm probably most passionate about, at least in our business and the way that we go about it, is the level of training that's going to be provided in data interpretation. Really, in my opinion, for full utility, and I think Jeff would agree, it's going to require layers of training and support in AgTech. It's a new venture for most people. And so we look at it every day, and we don't know everything, but we see it a lot given our site counts and the amount of customers that we work with and the amount of crops. We can provide that level of support and training. So whether it's sales support, so we talked about that, designing for the future, understanding your crop, how many sensors, your application, all the way through to our kind of behind the scenes, more often customer service team, but they do a great job. Everything from billing to, hey, I need a minor site adjustment, or like what Richard Gates would do to provide some on the phone support, looking at your system, making sure that it's doing what you need it to do, getting that data, just to the field service, whether it is your account manager, or some of our folks that go out. If you do have an issue, tractor blight, hey, this pole's down, can we get it up and running? Yes, we're right on it. We'll get it taken care of. That's the approach that we take. But I love that we go one step further as a group. And this is really our strength is, we accessing that data through all this training. So we say, hey, Mr. Customer, here's how you get all these great graphs. Thank you. And let me know if you need anything. Well, I give you all this data. Well, what do you do with it? And so getting that help and turning that data into manageable action is really where the value is created, or at least maximized, in my opinion. We have great account managers. We have a number of people with certifications. We are the most certified company in irrigation from the Irrigation Association. We also have some accreditations through the American Society of Agronomy. Ask about the level of training that you're going to get, not just the support and, hey, how do I log in? Hey, how do I log out? But what do I do with this data? How does this help me? Yes, my water got down here, but how much water did I put on? And why didn't the water move through this profile the way that I thought it would? Because there's a lot of assumptions that growers take, especially when adopting to drip irrigation. If you're a first-time drip irrigation or micro irrigation farmer and you're implementing AgTech, there's a whole new learning curve that gets implemented there. And we are more than qualified, in my opinion, the most qualified to help you take that journey. So
Yeah, well said. Well said, Cory.
Very well said.
I mentioned, Jeff Klein from Klein Family Farms on a few weeks ago or a month ago, and that was the thing he said. He'd bought tech before, and it was kind of, here's your stuff, good luck. And he said with Jane, it was completely different. They're there to partner with you. Jane is there to help you learn exactly what you need to get out of the technology. So that was the number one thing that he was impressed with, was the training and what we do as a follow-up after.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah. So you guys, a lot of information today, and I really appreciate all this. I'm thinking about these questions, not for when I buy AgTech only, but when I'm buying any technology. I think they were spot on. I thought that was really good. But if I'm thinking about it a day from now, a week from now, a month from now, can I reach out? Can I call you guys? Can we talk about this?
anytime.
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
means anybody who's watching, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it happens.
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always joke, right? I'm not that hard to find between social media and driving around. So I'm more than happy to talk to anybody here, obviously being local to the Fresno area and covering most of the Central Valley, but talk to growers from all over that are interested in technology and have questions, because at the end of the day, it's about using water appropriately and to maximum benefit. So wherever that is, we're more than happy to pitch in and help out.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
Jeff and Cory, thanks again. Really appreciate your time today. For those of you viewing, thank you. Really appreciate that you guys are here and learning. And remember, you can see all our trainings at the Janes USA /trainings page on our website. We're also wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and our podcasts have really been growing in popularity lately, which is very encouraging to me to know that people are out there trying to better themselves, even when they're on the job, driving job to job. They're still trying to learn, and that makes me feel good and encouraged for the future of ag and the future of technology. So thanks guys. Thanks everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next week.
You too, Richard. Thanks,
Thanks,
Cory.
Richard.
All right. Thank you.